I will present now the speakers of this nice small crowd. Angela Condello, she is tenure-track assistant professor of legal philosophy at the University of Messina and adjunct professor at the University of Turin. And she is sometimes also perhaps supported by a good friend of mine of the University of Messina. I hope so, at least, that she will do that. Angela, you will respond to that later on. Sabine Meyer, she is professor of American Studies and co-director of the North American Studies program at the University of Bonn that I had the pleasure to create with some 30 years ago. Her research primarily focuses on Native American writing and law politics from the 19th century onward, representations of Native Americans, indigenous people in North America, popular culture, and the history, literary representations of social movements, forced migration, processes of identity formation, ethnicity, race, gender in the United States of America. Masahiro Noguchi from Munich. He's a political theorist and a professor at the Faculty of Law at Seikei University, has published on Max Weber, Weber's reception in Japan, and the political theory of bureaucracy, and has been a former doctoral student of mine and has become a very good and close friend. Endowed with a lot of prizes, and on this prize he is, on the ticket of this prize, he is visiting with us and has been visiting with us lastly. Daisy Onyige, professor of sociology, especially criminology at the University of Port Harcourt, Nigeria. Currently, she is a Heinz Heinen Senior Fellow at the Cluster of Excellence Bonn Center for Dependency and Slavery Studies at the University of Bonn. Her research includes gender and crime, environmental sociology, gender and climate change, and cognate issues like conflict and peace building. So we are in the midst of our problematic. I start now with Angela. Let me ask you a question. What did it mean for you as a young researcher to be a fellow at the center for your studies, for your career, under the conditions that I have described before? This is my very simple question to you.
Yeah, very simple question that makes me nostalgic in some sense, but also happy to share my answers with this community of friends. As I was saying already earlier, when I commented on Greta's presentation, I was really moved, as usual, by Greta's presentations. It was not the first time, but I must say that throughout the day, I have felt moved a couple of times. I followed, despite my personal situation at the moment. I recently became a mom again, so I gave birth 50 days ago. So I followed the conference as I could, as much as I could, but it was really very intense, and I must say again, very emotional to go back to that time and space in Bonn, to that special place that you have described. That's as I used to call it when I was a junior fellow there, my castle on the Rhine. That was my way of describing it. It did look like a castle to me, or a big villa. But definitely the river played a crucial role in the setting. So we said it many times during our meetings, and I told you how important it was for me, the setting of that place for me, and of course the experience. We can say that it really changed my career, and it was crucial for my studies, and so both at the substantial level and at the formal level. I will just focus on two brief points because it's for people and it's already late in the afternoon. Point number one, the type of personal relations and these kind of elegant informality, I would call it, which I would say very much of this we owe it to Werner, to you, Werner, because you were able to condensate in one single style these dichotomies that you were mentioning in your presentation, the tradition and the hypermodern way of thinking. So the openness and at the same time the capacity to be coherent with some kind of deeply European way of thinking and also of imagining academia. And so this is my first point is personal relations among fellows. There, as a young fellow, I was 29 when I was a junior fellow. I had finished my PhD. Yeah, I turned 30 that year, so I spent my 30th birthday, which is a very symbolic birthday. They're in Bonn. So it's also interesting autobiographically to go back to that moment, because I was not even, now I'm a mother of two. And I have to say that meeting people and friends like Greta, I will allow myself to some personal confessions as well, was inspiring not only academically, but also to imagine the type of life that I wanted somehow, to see that was possible, to handle 3 kids and to be an international scholar, a renowned international scholar, to do excellent work and to handle a private life. People like her, like Pamela Zaversberg, who was far away from her kids. So these were my closest friends at that time, but I'm sure that there were other examples also in the following years also at the College. So this what I call this elegant informality, this way of treating all fellows as fellows, so ontologically as one type of subject, whereas in the European academic world, there is a very strong hierarchical system. I think Germany as well is quite hierarchical. Italy for sure is, not necessarily in a bad way, but certainly the type of strength of freedom of self-representation that Werner was describing as a young scholar was a gift that I received as a fellow at the College, because I was treated very well also in Italian academia. I'm not saying that I was mistreated there, but in the College for the first time after Berkeley, but in Berkeley I was still a PhD student, so that was different for me, and it was a different phase of life. For the first time in Bonn, I felt treated like one of the circle, just like Maurizio Ferraris, just like Greta Olson, because the mentality of the College, the philosophy of the College is really putting thought at the very center and not hierarchies. Although there were huge gaps in academic hierarchies between the fellows, or there could be, that was completely irrelevant. And not just because we could meet, we were roommates, or we could have our sect at the sunset with Greta, or watching movies with Enrico Terrone, but really because within the College, what was at the center, and this is the second point I want to touch, is where the themes was the research. As Werner was saying, the College had some questions that we were facing, the broader question of normativity, and then each one of us the research question, and that was the relevant thing. Whereas often in European academia, especially, we spend so much time, at least I'm speaking about Italy very much, we spend so much time in what is in between thoughts, whereas their thought was the real subject. What are you working on? And that question was a real question, like what are you engaged with? And that is something that I had felt, as I said already, in the United States in a different way, that kind of beautiful informality, which is very productive because it leaves you the freedom of really saying what you think without saying, well, can I ask this question in this seminar, or will it be better to leave this full professor to speak first? Or should I mention Weber because this commissar in the habilitation, whatever, is working on that, and so on and so forth. These are still quite, Werner is doing this, but this is still happening in some circles. And so being at the Collègue was a fantastic state of exception in some sense in my personal history, because of this way of relationships, and also because of the uniqueness of this style of research. You listed these characteristics, the interdisciplinarity, creating a learning community, the independence of the Collègue, and also the independence and the autonomy of the fellows, and also having one topic or one set of topics. That was really crucial for my work, because it led me to see myself as a part of a community that, for example, of law and humanities community, of law and literature community, which is very well established internationally. But again, within the disciplines of a more traditional European academia, I'm speaking about European, it's a bit tranchant because of course, France and Germany and Italy have their differences, but we're still very attached, I would say, to our disciplines. You're a professor of private law, you're a professor of philosophy of law. You don't, if you do law and literature, it's still considered, for us at least, as a kind of a weekend activity, some kind of a stylistic freedom that you can allow yourself to, but it's never the core task. And there, instead, in the castle on the Rhine, I realized that it was possible to actually work a whole life on some kind of subjects, and in a certain way, and that gave me a lot of courage. Also when I went back to Italy, and that defined me as a scholar with a very original profile. And not just original with a very positive connotation, because I had questioned myself very much during that year about what I wanted to study, what I wanted to do. And so each time that now I write something, maybe it's not relevant at all, but at least I have this self-representation that was built, that started to be built that year. That it continued, of course. I was very young at that time. And that gave me, for example, I would call it really the courage, for example, to engage in publications with John Searle and Maurizio Ferraris. When I was 28, I was studying Maurizio Ferraris. And when I was, so really, like, it was a person, even we were both from Torino, both Italian. Maurizio is a wonderful person that doesn't consider those hierarchies. He's a very international scholar, but still, it would have been impossible for me as an early postdoctoral researcher to imagine to write not just a paper, but a book with Maurizio. And when I was, well, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, we published a book together with Maurizio and John about money, by the way, very inspired by Simmel. And the conversation started there. So that way of working and studying that I profited from in the Collègue was extremely productive at a symbolic level, but also at a very material level. So publication-wise, yeah, publication-wise, and I'm done. Publication-wise, for sure, and also because I built relationships that keep going. So, for example, I then organized conferences with Peter Goodrich. Again, something that as a very young scholar was more like of a dream, and then it became very real. So yeah, it's, I would say that the main the key word of that experience was that I learned to dare to think. So it was very enlightened as an experience. I felt and enjoyed this freedom of thinking. So thank you very much for that.
No, thank you, Angela, very much for this very profound report that you've done, and analysis. It was an ontology of a Center for Advanced Study that you proposed in the tradition of social ontology where you have been raised, and we try to make it in accordance or to relate it to another type of social sciences, sociology, for example, and sociology of law, etc. Thank you very much for this. And I think one point that you mentioned really may be important. And I look at Dieter Sadowski, with whom I was in the same group for the Studienstiftung. We had, as very young guys, the chance to see really great and to meet great figures that were invited in our small group. And this was important. Even our personal professors with whom we worked were great ones. It were not the little figures that do exist also in academia. And I think as a very much talented young scholar, as you have been at this moment, and now you have become a colleague simply. So this process is important, and that's why it is so really necessary to imply young students into that procedure. And I'm so happy that Richard Münch, my academic teacher, will do the last lesson. You understand? That's important. So we go to the next one, and this is Sabine Meyer, and she is no less a wonderful young researcher, but in addition, she has become a professor at our university in American Studies with all the background that she has in her package. For example, the wonderful dissertation about the question, we are what we drink. So was drinking behavior the main driving element during your stay? I don't think so, but there have been other elements too. So the question, excuse me, what did the fellowship mean for you regarding the focus of your research, we are what we drink, and for your career?
Well, thank you, Vanna. And actually, I have to say to my dear colleague Greta that I was the one she told on the phone that it's a boarding school for adults. When I called her before I actually sent off the application to talk to her about the experience. And maybe sort of to compare my experience, I was a junior fellow too, like Angela. And I was coming from the German system. So I worked on my habilitation, and my major issue was kind of the opposite issue to Greta's, to not like read all over the place, but kind of like be very focused and to really work on this habilitation, because every German in the room knows that without this habilitation, then full stop. So there's a ceiling there in German academia. So this had been my greatest worry for years, because I had been the coordinator of the Osnabrück Summer School for the study of law. So I had been in law and culture for a very long time, but I had been, I had a lot of administrative duties, and I really had a lot of knowledge basically, and I knew what I wanted to do, but I really didn't have a sufficient time. So when I got the get-go, the yes from the Käte Hamburger colleague, it was a huge relief. And I had this precise schedule, what I wanted to do. And I wanted to write as many chapters of that book I had in my head. So maybe this was a little bit of a different experience than Greta's, or maybe even Angela's, who came from a different system. So I think the book you mentioned, Werner, We Are What We Drink, that was actually my dissertation. And I had just finished it when I came to the colleague, or it had just been published, I should say. So it had been finished for a while, had just been published in the US. And in that dissertation, maybe to say 2 sentences, the law played an important role because alcohol consumption in the United States was very much negotiated in the legal sphere. But at that time, in that first project, I was not into law as culture. So basically, while law plays an important role in that book all over the place, I kind of looked at it as a discrete realm of action. So basically as law as a reaction to culture and culture as a reaction to law. I mean, I still like that book, but I think I wouldn't write it anymore in the way I did before being exposed to law and literature, law and culture scholarship. So I think I suspected by the end of writing that book that, you know, there is an intrinsic, you know, constitutive relationship between law and culture, but this was not sort of the, you know, the interest of that first book. And I came with my second book on native removal writing to the colleague. And there I really wanted to study the implication of law and literature. This was sort of the goal I came with. And the colleague was very, very helpful. And I wanted to add something to what Angela said. I agree with all of this, but maybe something I call the contingency of exchange or experience. So I want to give you an example. So the method I used was I would read Native American literature, let's say from the 19th century, and literature on this Indian removal, this forced relocation. But this was literature written after removal. And I was trying to legally contextualizing the writing. So basically, for instance, I had a novel from 1854 written after removal, and I tried to contextualize it legally. So if the author, for instance, was a lawyer, and I wanted to find out which debates is this person engaging in. And this really required me to read into law, legal theory, property theory, federal Indian law. And I remember being stuck on this one chapter, and I knew there was something out there the lawyer, the native lawyer who wrote that novel actually worked on, but I didn't know what it was. And I went to the conference Abstraktion im Recht und in den Künsten. And Laurent de Sutter gave a talk about something completely different, not related to my topic at all. I mean, nothing was related to Native American literature in the colleague at the time I was there. I think not again either. And he talked about Thomas Aquinas and the different forms of laws, his theories. And all of a sudden, I left this conference and I knew what my chapter was all about. I knew that this is exactly what the native author in the 19th century had actually theorized in his novel. And I just didn't see it because I didn't know like the theory. And I went back, and this is my book chapter now. So I'm reading John Rowling Ridge's 1854, the first Native American novel ever. I read it in light of the theories of St. Thomas Aquinas. So basically this was the colleague. I mean, I would have never probably been exposed to this legal theory. I mean, maybe, but this is what I call the contingency of experience. Or I talked to Tiziana Andina about Agamben. And actually, I wrote a book chapter. It's coming out with Duke University Press next year on, you know, Georgios Agamben's political theories and Diane Clancy's Pushing the Bear. This is what I mean by contingency of experience, that even if you have a plan, I mean, I was on a track. I had a very, I had a schedule even. I worked along, right? But this contingency, being able to listen in, going to the meetings, the conferences, talking to people about apparently unrelating things, and all of a sudden things fall into place. And I think this was for me an absolutely amazing experience. And I think also something Greta said before, the multitude of legal orders that one, you know, because my project is about legal orders, right? I mean about indigenous legal orders versus settler colonial orders, and how these orders contest each other, how indigenous people adapt to, negotiate, contest settler colonial orders. And I think talks by Raja Zakrani, I remember one talk, I mean, it was about a completely different, like, you know, completely different focus, different location, different time, different country. Nevertheless, one could apply, you know, sort of ideas about legal orders, pluralities, interaction, contestation to one's own thinking. And I'm sort of looking at the time because I know there are two more speakers. And how did it change my career? Well, first of all, I got 150 pages of the book written. I mean, that was my major takeaway, and I knew what the rest of the book would look like. So basically, and right after I got back from the Käte Hamburger colleague, I applied for a DFG-Antrag, and that went through too. So I also had the Sachbeihilfe, an eigene Stelle. And I think me being at the colleague helped getting the funding because, you know, things reinforce each other. Sometimes, unfortunately, but for me, it was good in this. And I think a personal thing was too that I became more conscious of my own interdisciplinarity. So I knew this is the way I want to work in the future. I don't want to stay in my own discipline. And American studies is extremely interdisciplinary, I mean, compared to other disciplines. But I knew that I want to move beyond this. I want to be even more interdisciplinary. And this is the way I want to work. And I don't know, I mean, maybe because I became more outspoken about my interdisciplinarity, maybe this contributed to my appointment in Bonn, because I'm now running an interdisciplinary program. And I made a huge argument in favor of interdisciplinarity. And I talked about my work, right? And maybe as a last point, I mean, and Angela mentioned this too, is friendships and contacts. And I'm just looking at Judith Hahn. And this is one example, Werner, you know, Thomas Dreyer, Daniela Di Fulco. I mean, I could name others, but Judith and I, this is an interesting story because we've been following each other, and not on Twitter and not on Facebook. We are too old for this, I guess, I don't know. But we've been literally following each other. So visiting each other in Münster and like seeing each other, talking to each other. And now she came to Bonn too. So I mean, this is maybe absolutely coincidence, but we've been following each other ever since that day. And the same is true for Tim Shaw, who has also been very influential for my work, because speaking to an artist at the time that the author is dead in the philologies and talking to him about his way of creating art has been, well, wonderful for me. But I'll stop now, actually, because I think there are two more people.
Thank you so much, dear Sabine. It really, once again, new aspects, and in addition, in relation to Angela's wonderful talk. And so what I noted is the contextuality, the contingency experience, and also the internal interdisciplinarity that you made acquaintance with. And this is a lot if you learn that. And I think it's the miracle of how interdisciplinarity is possible is rather easily to be answered. If you don't realize it in yourself, it is completely, yes, very difficult, or even more difficult. But to talk to oneself is also an interesting thing. When I see people in the street who talk apparently with themselves, but they talk into their devices in order to speak to somebody else, it is not so, it doesn't look so crazy as it has done 20 years ago. You would have been put into, not into jail, but into a clinic if you would go like most people go when they're in the street. So a lot of changes, and thank you very much for this very, very nice and profound report. And we hope to continue our interactions and communications with regard to concrete questions, not only with regard to Chardonnays, but also. Next one would be Masahiro Noguchi. I have, however, a very concrete question. How important is it for a fellow to be on place? You have been here. Others were far away in Morocco and elsewhere with regards to international academics and its networking. Since the German Bundespräsident honored you with an award, an important award, how important is exchange for the German-Japanese relations? You were so kind to bring me in touch with Mr. Hayashi, for example, and we have a common project for the future. So personal residency is important, or could we just go to, with the good experiences we had, to online communication in international sciences? So just tell us a little bit about your experience.
Okay. We can get information, a huge amount of information via internet now. Such information is, I think, superficial. Yeah, we need deep information to be able to think deeply. Yeah, during my, please let me talk about my personal history or personal story in Bonn. During my stay in Bonn in 2013, I wrote each month an essay for a Japanese monthly magazine. It was my job to report freely about Germany. I wrote about, for example, the Käte Hamburger colleague, of course,
yes,
and about Werner Gebhardt, Rechtsphilosoph, Rechtssoziologe, and the German political word, Volkspartei, People's Party. New realism in philosophy. Yeah, Maurizio Ferraris was a fellow at that time.
Yeah.
And so on. In the spring of 2019, shortly before the corona pandemic spread globally, I was fortunately awarded the Philipp Franz von Siebold Prize. Siebold Prize is for researcher who contributed the academic exchange between Germany and Japan. I was able to receive this award in recognizing of my monthly reports in 2013. And as well as my research on Max Weber since my doctoral thesis in Bonn. My monthly reports were based on conversation in or near the Käte Hamburger colleague. Through the conversation, I could get deep information. Yeah, it was very, very rich for me. And therefore, I could a little bit better article. Yeah, it is a wonderful experience for me. Yeah, my answer to your question is we need information, deep information. Yeah, Käte Hamburger colleague is the place where we can reach deep information. That is my answer. Thank you.
I am simply deeply impressed, and I know that I have really to improve my Japanese in order to read those articles personally. And you were even hiding them because you are such a modest person, and such is perhaps also a moral quality that we have try to realize in the center. As Angela said in the beginning, hierarchies according to formal positions did never work in this house. No, it is the best argument. Everybody has been very modest and with the presupposition that the other certainly will know much more than oneself. But on this basis, there is exchanges possible. And so I think we should not exclude this kind of ethical normativity in understanding the good functioning of a Center for Advanced Study. So if you just invite the big guys, and we had a lot of big guys, some of us are big guys here in this round, most of us, I would say. The big guy argument doesn't hold when there are other big guys and girls and who know better. So this is, I think, a very strong element of the Center for Advanced Study, because the very old idea of German university that only the best argument counts in the seminar context is really very crucial for an understanding of this. And deep knowledge is needed. I would absolutely agree. And this is a further element in getting a list of items, of structural components of a Center for Advanced Study that really would work. Dear Daisy, how do you see this aspect of a format like a Center for Advanced Study? Is it possible to realize something of that kind? Are we still very naive? And is it just my impression sometimes is in the diversity debate, there is a lot of superficiality in that. We don't mean it really. So I don't believe really in all the good behavior that sometimes we see. But in the end, when it's about the question, who will be the leading person, the director for a center of diversity, for example, and we see that's a Renanian girl who is doing this. She's neither a member of the community we talked about before, or something else of this kind, a nice person. Certainly that is not the question. And you haven't heard what I said, please, but you know what I mean, Daisy. So can everyone find a place, or maybe even change the structures in Western academia where this respect for diversity, respect for others is perhaps very much still lacking, at least to my perception. And I won't hear that we really have solved all the problems. I don't think so. Is it?
Well, the question I would also ask, I'll throw back, is why does diversity matter? Why does it matter? Yeah. We know, we have an idea what diversity is. We know it has to do with involving people, practices, people from different social and ethnic backgrounds and sexual orientation and the rest. But you ask yourself, like in a Center of Advanced Study, is it important? Does it matter? And I have to say that my experience as a fellow at the Käte Hamburger College is something that I was very excited. I mean, I've been a fellow of, if you check my CV, I've been a fellow of several universities, centers, institutions in Europe, for that matter. And the Käte Hamburger College embodies diversity and inclusion. And that's something that Sabine doesn't know she's saying, and what's Angela, they were saying, but they didn't know it's diversity. That was what made that place so special. It has it's important. The world is moving forward, moving so fast. We have a rise of capitalism and technology is driving everything. However, people have to work together. And in an advanced study center, you need different kinds of knowledge, information to move forward. Now, does it have if in an organization, for example, if you want to solve problems, be creative and innovative, then this is where you need diversity. And this was something that I experienced while I was a fellow in the Käte Hamburger College. People came with from different backgrounds, different knowledge, things I didn't know about. You know, my background is in sociology and criminology. Some from the arts. And we still found a way to bond by trying to understand other people. In being in that kind of situation, you now there's this breakdown of your biases, because many of you don't know you have implicit biases or conscious and unconscious biases. But when you see that, oh, somebody from Nigeria, that's where I come from, can speak English, you start thinking differently, I think. You see somebody from China presenting something, the state of the arts, it makes you think differently. I'm not saying that there's not going to be there's no conflict. When I say conflict, it's very likely. Conflict, I mean, is kind of psychological, because sometimes you could be uncomfortable. You could be put in a place of being uncomfortable. But then again, it's also professionally elevating. We learn something. So it's a kind of yin-yang situation. It is possible. The world is now seeing that it's very important, as the world is global anyway, that we need to work together. And then in order for us to be successful in everything we're doing, we should be able to put aside our biases, our stereotypes, and even open our rooms for some underrepresented people, so that we can learn. When we don't involve everybody, we are missing out on so much. But this advanced study, the Hamburger College, it embodied everything. Today I'm at the Bonn Center for Dependency and Slavery Studies. I remember I was in the Käte Hamburger College when Raja, she heard my presentation and she said, you know, your work would do very well in the Bonn Center of Slavery and Dependency Studies, because I was working on human trafficking and they deal with slavery. Mine is contemporary slavery, you know, so this is something modern day slavery. And she made sure she gave me the contacts, and Gebert also gave me contacts, say follow up. And today it's history, the story is history. And so there's this, you know, we were also interested in each other, each other's works. I've listened to Sabine's works. Raja is, in fact, I know so much about her research. She doesn't know, I've not been there. But I think that if somebody talks about her works, I can say, oh yeah, I have an idea. And so we learned so much. This world is so global, so interconnected, that diversity is very important. And it is necessary and it is possible. It has already been practicalized in the Käte Hamburger College, so it can be done anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Daisy, for this moving report, and everybody who is critical with regard to him, herself, will know that we can reach different kind of stages of becoming more and more sensitive for diversity. I could not, if I compare my understanding of this problematic to a state, let me say, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, there is a certain evolution in my proper understanding, but related to experiences with otherness. And so this, and to make the experience to be enriched by this diversity is so important. But if there is no communication, if there is no contact, nothing will happen. And that is why to have a space, a location where this kind of communication and interaction is possible is so important. And such a center, of course, can create an atmosphere where you may learn for your life. If you are open, at least, and you take the time to be inspired by the other and by otherness as such. Yeah, so thank you very much. So it was very important to listen to that. There are very important remarks to be made. Still, I would allow 3, not more, because I'm done for today. I try to not to fall back. No, never. I could continue 3 hours at least. Okay, go ahead, Raja. Vas-y.
Thank you. Don't worry, I will not ask questions. I wanted just to say something. I think, thank you really to all of you. I was really very touched, and I don't know, perhaps also for history, I have to say what I would like to say. Thank you, Sabine, for your what you said about your experience and eulogies, but I have to tell a small story. As you gave us a gift, I would like to give you back another one, and I have to confess that when you was fellow with us, we had really a circle of rather ladies, young scholars. So I don't have all names in mind, but at that time, you was also very active in organizing some meetings. And I'm really thankful to you because I discovered even some places in Bonn. I live in Bonn, but it was completely new for me. And we shared dinners in all conviviality, but we also discussed very serious ideas and projects with you, with Judith Hahn, with Martha Buchholz, with many others. And it was, we called this Mädelstreffen. So I think, as perhaps you think we gave you something, but you gave us also really this wonderful thing back. I would like to thank you for this, and of course to thank everybody. With Daisy, of course, we had the chance to start before Corona, so we also lived some kind of conviviality face to face, but then it was more difficult. But I think at the end, to link this to what Masahiro Noguchi said, to what Angela Condello said, I think we are lucky because we had the human in the center of science. And this is, I think, really very, very important. And I think we are lucky because I'm sure in this world, especially in not very privileged world and countries, there are a lot of great young and not very young scholars who unfortunately don't have this chance to be accepted and in their diversity, this is Daisy, and to have the floor and Freiraum in order to think and to write in all freedom. So I think, yes, we are really lucky for that.
Thank you very much, Raja. If I'm still the organizer of this meeting, I think there should be kind of closure of the session. Nothing could be said more important than what you said before, Raja, because the human aspect is so important, and to respect the other as a human being. And this is the basis for all debates about humanity's right and human rights, etc. And it's sometimes not so evident to act like this. And this is also a learning field in a lot of respects. And to have had this experience, it was not only to make a project and to construct and to make a decoration for the house and the home of legal cultures, but it was much more that was only possible in communication and interaction with others who had the same ideas in this respect. And this was wonderful. And we shouldn't be too melancholic about it, because in the end, it will be the question what we will do in the future with this wonderful network and with this experience. It's not the end, Angela and Greta and others in this room, and Diana. We didn't talk about the work of Diana yet. We will do it. We'll find the occasion for that. If, for example, an encyclopedia of the legal cultures would become a realistic project to make together, I would like to make it about, in this case, then a very specific normativity, but we won't talk about this now. So
I think Greta would like to say.
Excuse me. Yes, I didn't see that. Yes, yes, the hand. Yes, the yellow hand. Go ahead, please.
Actually, I'm working on decoloniality. It's not a white hand. Trying to move forward, work through my own processes. It's a long road. I just wanted to comment on how moved I was with everyone, and to say part of the aspect of, what I was taking away is the personal engagement, how we all fell in love with each other in different ways, and also the de-hierarchization, also an aspect of diversity and creating more inclusive societies, but also more inclusive structures of knowledge. And something I wanted to comment on is that the center not only gave us this fabulous life and these beautiful places to live, and a wonderful place to make coffee or drink tea together and a rooftop, but it also encouraged the people working there. And I want to comment on that and just mention Teresa Hanska or Candace Kariston or Katja Strantz or Stefan Finger, all people who made my life amazing, but were also encouraged from the center at the area. They were very de-hierarchical as compared to the rest of German academia, to show themselves in the wonderful things they did. And I want to thank the center and the Codex for that too.